I think the beautiful thing about the spiritual life is that I can't maintain my growth without having new experiences. And so just like my alcoholic life, I continued to have new alcoholic experiences um, to live my alcoholic life. So I think in one form or another in the spiritual life, I think a valid part of the spiritual life is having new experiences and growing in that. So I just wanted to share today on growth and the spiritual life. My name is John, and I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. And so I think the most important part of the spiritual life is really understanding what growth is. And so am I either growing or am I fading, or am I growing or dying? I don't think there's this in between part. Either I'm in recovery or I'm in relapse. And so it's one or the other. And I think that especially when we're in relapse or we're in decline or we're in going into dying, I think we can be really in denial of that. We could think that everything's going well, and meanwhile there's a fire behind us and it's going to consume us, and other people can see it. But I think this is what the beautiful thing of the spiritual life is. It's really up to us. No different than if you had the disease of diabetes or heart disease. It's really up to you to follow the prescribed instructions, the suggested way of living. Is that cutting out sugar altogether? Is that cutting out smoking and red meat and all of those things? Is that implementing a physical regimen of exercise and disciplined sleep patterns? And it's really up to me to follow that. It's really up to the person with that disease to follow the suggestions to get a direct result. And so that's what we have in the spiritual life, is a bunch of suggestions to achieve a desired recipe, a desired result. So if we were baking Nana's butter tarts and I didn't like all that shortening that she puts in and that butter, and then I would try to reduce other things, and it's super time invested. And so I want to, like, for me, I like multiplication, so we need more of it. And so I cut some corners. I am not going to get Nana's butter tarts. Nana's butter tarts are made with butter and love and everything in the middle of that. And so I'm going to try to pawn off my butter tarts as Nana's butter tarts, and everybody's going to say either John's a liar or Nana needs hospitalization help because these are horrible. Nana would never put us through that. Nana's not like that. Nana is love and care. And so I wouldn't get the result that I wanted to. And so the spiritual life is a myriad of suggestions to get a precise recipe, to get a precise outcome. And so our primary purpose of the spiritual life is not telling everybody about it, but actually the primary purpose for me in the spiritual life is to have conscious contact with God on a daily basis. And so my primary purpose is to be a fit spiritual condition. And so I think that's the growing part of it. I grow into it. Either I am in it or I'm not in it. And then if I am in the new life, then I have to grow in it. So I don't know if this will ring a bell, but I'm going to give you some hints. And I guess you can just text it to me or put it in the chat. There's a TV show. It ran from 1985 to 1992. I'm pretty sure no one has the answer yet. The main character, the father, his name was Dr. Jason Seaver. He had a couple kids. His kids' name were Mike, Ben, and Carol. Dr. Seaver was actually played by, no one's putting in the answer. Dr. Seaver was actually played by Alan Thicke. I believe Mike was actually played by Kirk Cameron. Leonardo DiCaprio was it Family Ties? No, that's not it. Growing Pains. And so the whole show was a suburb family. The dad is a doctor. I think he's a psychiatrist. And he has normal kids doing normal suburb crap. and they get into trouble. And it was a show, I believe that the whole point of it was to bring up topics and to discuss high school topics and suicide stuff and sex stuff and all this stuff that we go through as we grow. And so they actually called it Growing Pains. And so I believe that in the spiritual life, we have to grow in that to become more effective and to grow in our relationship with God. That's what that means. And so it's interesting that I believe that all of nature follows the same pattern as well. Has anybody ever worked out? And in that first week, what did you find out? You found out that you were way more of a marshmallow than you thought you were. I like to work out on my arms first because it's like the glory, like no one cares about your cardio. No one's looking at your legs, but they might notice your arms a little bit. And so I always start at the arms because it's like a little bit easier and it feels like it's more beneficial. And it's like you work out for half an hour on your arms, and for the next week, you're like, don't touch me. I can't straighten my arms. You're kind of like robotic and you've like ripped up so much muscle. But the whole point of that in the physical world is repairing the damage that you've done. And so it's growing in my muscle. We had a tree problem in the east end of Orleans where we live. And these trees got really sick. And the solution was to cut them down. As a tree falls down, and trees are a lot more alive than people think. I heard screaming, little trees screaming. Okay, I didn't hear that, but I heard chainsaws. Kind of sounded like trees screaming. And as they were screaming and coming down, what they do for survival is they spew off little seeds. So what happened in our back field, there was 100 little trees that are growing. One of those trees we kept in the back, like right behind our back fence. And it started growing. And over the course of 2 years, it's a 20-foot tall tree already. I don't know, maybe it's 3 years, but it feels like 2. But it's growing so much. And the pain of dying and having something reproduce is really part of the spiritual life, because we're not entering into a recovered life or the spiritual life to get my life back on track. It's actually to abandon my life. It's actually to lose my life so that I can get a new life that God has already picked out for me. And so we were down for the Thanksgiving long weekend. We got the honor of going down south to Strathroy, Ontario, to part 2 of my cousin's wedding. So it was a COVID wedding, very small. And then this was the party. And so we're outside under a tent. There's probably 150 people there. There's suits, there's ties, there's nice dresses, there's all the things, there's music playing, there's tables set. It was very elegant. And so in the country, elegance and barbecue go well together. And so this was the highlight of my weekend, was that there was a food truck that had a smoker on it. So it was smoked chicken, smoked ribs. There was crusty, like mac and cheese that has the crust on top, and then you cut into that crust and you pull up and it's all the cheese dangling, that kind of mac and cheese. There was the baked beans, like there's baked beans, but then there's French people baked beans. These were like the French people baked beans on steroids. Like there was the tomato, but overwhelming molasses flavor to it. And like, I looked at the baked potato and said, no, you're not getting in my way. And I just left it for the good stuff. There was vegetables too and salad. And I realized like I need a double plate, but they wouldn't actually give me a double plate. I saw another plate, but they were for dessert. And I said, may I take one of those? And they actually said no. And I had a choice right then and there to be an adult or to be a child. I chose to be an adult. I was pretty proud of myself because I guarantee I know I could have grabbed one of those plates. I could have manipulated to go double plated, but I did. I'm very proud of myself. That is growth, my friends. I did not manipulate for the second plate so I could get salad and, the stuff that I didn't eat anyway. And so as we're eating this beautiful dinner and as everybody's looking so beautiful, I know that there is a few of us in the crowd going, this is beautiful. Oh, those poor young people. Marriage, it's going to be tough. And we all know that we cannot and at 10 o'clock a pierogi truck pulled up, and there was an open bar and all this stuff, and it was glory land. We do not stay in the party. There is some of us that are a bit older that have been married for 10-20 years that were like, this party is over at the end of this night, and then the real work goes. That's where the growth happens, is in the marriage. And so the wedding day is the party, and maybe we've all experienced that. It's like, I'm coming up for breath for the first time. Oh my goodness, the glory of God has separated me from drugs and alcohol and fill in the blank, all of these third alternatives. It's just pushed them out of the way. And that's God's grace, and that's God's presence. And that's what a relationship with this God does with all power and all knowledge, is that he sets the captives free. And so I've experienced that, but that initial part, maybe God's grace, really does have a time slot. And so if I'm dependent on God's grace all the time, trying to live my life, then I'm going to run out of grace, and I'm going to go back to the gutter from where I came from. The party really is over. So now after the party's over, I get to be in this relationship that I really have to grow into. And so that's really what my job is on a daily basis, is really growing in this relationship. And so it brought me to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in page 85. And it says it's easy to rest, to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. So it's not even talking about alcohol. It's talking about the spiritual program of action. So forget alcohol. My recovery has nothing to do with alcohol. If I could have solved that problem, I would have solved that long ago, before I had to do all this work, and have this different life, have this new life that I would not trade for anything in this world. But that's what it's talking about. In the spiritual life, it's actually easy for us. We're kind of designed to have this need of God, and we're pulled away from it. And so it's easy to kind of let up. It's kind of easy to get mundane about things, or get caught in a rut. But the real spiritual life, and how I started, was it's new and fresh every day. And so just like I had a new experience with alcohol on a daily basis, or whatever, fill in the blank for you, I have to have a new experience with God on a daily basis. And so what it says here is, we are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. I like the ism on the end, the I, self, me, because isn't that really what our problem is? What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on our maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day where we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. Ask yourself that. Am I carrying the vision of God's will into every one of my activities? Saying, how can I best serve thee? Not saying, how can I best serve me? And also saying, thy will, not mine, be done. We had a great example of that in the Bible. Jesus going to the cross, going to the mission for the heart of man, for the heart of woman, for the heart of humanity, so that we can have a savior, so that we can have power over the enemy. Didn't he say he didn't want to do it? He didn't want to go through with what he had to go through, and he actually said, thy will, Father, not mine, be done. And if he's struggling with this, don't we have that same struggle? And this is what we need to grow in. Every day is a day where we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are the thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our power along this line. all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. Much is already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from him who has all knowledge and all power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. And so that's what my work is. Whatever, even if you don't have an addiction like mine or some of the people that you know, this is still true in the spiritual life. We live on a daily basis in conscious contact with him so that we may be filled with his power and his glory and his knowledge. And now my job becomes, my thinking has to coincide with his will. So how do I do that? Well, in our big book on our LifeLab book on page 104, we kind of get into the directions of that, because this is the continuation and the growth of the plant that's grown inside of me. So if you look at the Garden of Eden and you look at the tree of life in the center of that, and if you say that was the temple of God, God's chosen people were in there. They cultivated and took care of the garden, and God's presence was right in there. And now we have the ability to have God's presence inside of us. We have the Eden garden inside of us, the tree of life inside of us, the Spirit of God inside of us. And now we get to cultivate that. So do I want to have a healthy temple? Do I want to have a temple of God that I'm actually cultivating and growing in? And so when I look at that concept of my body is the temple of God, and I want to grow in my capacity to have God's love and peace and joy and comfort inside of me. So on a daily basis, and if you're a 12-step person, this is right out of step 10 and 11. It gives us directions to live the spiritual life. And so I'm watching on a daily basis. I'm watching for fear to pop up. I'm watching for resentment. I'm watching for selfishness. I'm watching for self-pity. How many of you press the snooze button today? Full of self-pity right at the beginning of the day. Shame on you. No, I'm just kidding. But that's how subtle it is. That snooze button is a button of self-pity. I don't want this day to start yet. No, I'm not ready. Right? But we had a plan last night, didn't we? Didn't we have a plan last night? Come on, little fella. You can do it. Get out of bed. So we're watching for these things. I go to God. I confess that I'm powerless, that I need his power. If there's something in between me and God, like resentment and shame or fear, I talk about it. I talk about it. I go to somebody and discuss it and make right any wrongs. And then I turn back on being the child and God being the employer, being the father, me being the employee, me being the God being the employer, me being the employee, me being the child, God being the father. And so I think that's the daily practice of growing in that. I'm not living out of self-will, but it's always there. That 2% is always there to bite me in the side of the neck. And then in the AM and the PM, I think these are the most important. The day always starts at night, by the way, but I'm going to start this in the morning. And this is a growing process. And so in the morning, I'm actually coming to God in position as I pray and meditate in the morning. And I kind of go into the Eden temple, and I connect to the garden, the tree of life, and I connect to God's spirit, and I just am asking for him to remove everything that is in the way, to let go of everything and everyone. And I come into I acknowledge his presence because it's always there. So I just acknowledge his presence, and then I just ask him to separate me from the things that are getting in the way, whether that's resentment, whether that's anxiety, whether that's a fear or self-pity or insecurities, all of those things. I just say, could you, with your power, remove those things so that I can have a better line of transmission to be able to hear your voice, to be able to know your will. And then I just take some time to let that happen. And then I go into a time of, Father, would you just inspire me? And so basically, I want God to inspire my thinking. I want God through his spirit to go, contact this person, contact that person, reach out to this person. We got to do this post on Facebook, or we need to have this talk, or we need to, I want God to inspire me. Like, it's like a team meeting in the morning. It's like I'm getting my instructions for today. I'm getting my script for the day. I'm getting my plan for the day and getting excited about it. Where is God going to use me? How am I going to strategically plan things? If you don't have a plan in the morning, like we always say, like, if I don't have a workout plan, my plan's not to work out. If I don't have a plan, my plan is to fail. And so every morning is coming into that realization that God's got a script for me. God's got direction for me. And so I need to be inspired in his spirit. That's a very important part of my day. I get excited about that. And then in the evening, I find this is a little bit harder, but in the evening, I'm constructively reviewing my day. So then I get to look back. And I don't know if you've had this experience. I have. The teacher gave us very specific instructions. Write your name on the top of your test, and then read through all of the test pages, and then start your test. I wrote my name. I followed the directions, and I started doing the test. I got to the end of the test and was heartbroken, angry, felt like crying but screaming at the same time, because if I had done what the teacher had said and gone through every page just to overview it, at the very end of it, it says, do not fill out any of the questions and hand in your paper after writing, not printing, your name on the test. Like, it was just a test to follow instructions. And so am I able to review my day like that? Am I able to test my spirit against God's spirit in a constructive way, not a destructive way? But now I'm entering into this review, this testing before I go to bed. And so did I follow the directions that I wanted to today? Am I doing what God is asking me to do in my physical, emotional, spiritual health? Did I follow the game plan? Did I go off course? Did I say dumb crap? I say dumb crap all the time. And it's like, could I have done that better? If you look at a football play, it's like we get in the huddle, we discuss the play, we say, whatever the play is, Orange 44, like we already know the playbook. We go out to execute the play and things happen. And all of a sudden, like, I'm supposed to run and catch the ball 10 yards, but like somebody hit me off the line. I didn't quite get there in time. And so what I want to do is review that play over and over so that I can actually execute that play more effectively, and that we start progressing better as a team. And that's what the fellowship is. That's what meetings are. That's how I grow in this. And this needs to be the most important part of my day, is having a relationship with God that I grow in.